Hello, everybody, and welcome back to 50 Shades of Tay. I'm Taylor Gonzalez, and my guest today is a veteran entertainment journalist and author of the upcoming book, Screaming and Conjuring. I'm so excited to welcome Clark Collis. Clark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, well, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it, and I absolutely love your book. It is so cool. There is so much to talk about and dive in with this, but let's go ahead and start with the cover art because that is incredible. I have my copy right here. I can't get over how cool this looks. What was your reaction the very first time you got to see this?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I should say that the artist is Gary Pullin, aka Ghoulish Gary Pullin, who, to be honest, if you've ever seen anything connected with horror, there's a fair chance that Gary did the artwork for it. He's most recently done the covers of a lot of Stephen King paperback reissues, and he did a great job. I'm not hesitating. It's just that my recollection is that we asked myself and Matthew, my publisher, we said, oh, like horror, but cool. That was kind of the extent of our brief, which is a pretty useless brief. And for him to come up with this absolutely wonderful image is great. And I couldn't be happier. My only complaint is that uh, and it's not about the artwork. It's not really a complaint at all. But quite recently, after the book was published, Gary said, "Oh, by the way, I was a zombie extra in Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead."
Oh,
Um, which was fun from a publicity point of view because he had a photograph of himself as a zombie, and so we could, put that out onto the internet. But I didn't say this to him, but I did think this would have been useful to know while I was writing the book and
wow.
writing a section about Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, and I could have included some quotes from you from Gary, but really no complaints at all. I'm astonishingly happy about the cover. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a gorgeous cover. And then this is the limited edition deluxe hardcover. And it also has something I've never seen before. It's this black foil page edges. To me, this book is going to stand out so much if you go into a bookstore and you get to see this gorgeous cover and then this black like edging. Uh, whose idea was this to make the edges of the page black? Because it's so cool.
I think that was Matthew, my publisher. I mean, I'm a writer, so I'm, an egomaniac who thinks that my words don't really need embellishment. If it was up to me, we'd probably just print it up on like A4 paper and staple it together and send it out. Mercifully, it's not up to me, and my publisher Matthew, um, is insistent that we present it in this incredibly beautiful and handsome fashion. I also did my previous book, You've Got Red on You, with 1984 Publishing, and which was a history of, which is a book about the making of Shaun of the Dead, and that's similarly beautiful and has sort of red pages, whereas that is black. This has red. So I'm gonna really have to think about. I don't know what I'm gonna. I've got to think of a I've got to think of a book that we can do like Green or something. Maybe
Ooh,
I can. I don't know, a history of M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening, where it's the
ooh.
plants that are killing people.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah, I just love the contrast of the white cover and then the black. I've seen other colors. I've seen like blue and stuff like that, but I've never seen the black. And
Yeah,
it's just it's gorgeous. But I gotta
it
ask you,
looks really nice.
yeah, incredible. When and how did you decide to write this book?
Well, as I said, I feel like I'm going out of my way to plug both my books here, but my previous book was about Shaun of the Dead. Um, and I had a great time writing that. And I grew up in a very small town called Wells in Somerset in England, which is the same town that the writer director Edgar Wright grew up in.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know him; he's a few years younger than me. But obviously, when he started making movies, I became very interested, and I was following his career. And for those who don't know, he did a TV show called Spaced, and then Shaun of the Dead, and then Hot Fuzz, which was shot in Wales, where we both grew up. And then he went on to Scott Pilgrim and The World's End, and he's doing the his next movie is an adaptation of The Running Man, a new
Mhm.
adaptation of Stephen King's novel, The Running Man. So I wrote this history of Shaun of the Dead. But what I realized when I was writing it was that the book was kind of connected to a lot of other films, or Shaun of the Dead was connected to a lot of other films.
Mhm.
So it was, as they would freely admit, Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg wrote a script very much inspired by George A. Romero's zombie films. And then in turn, Shaun of the Dead was part of that sort of wave of zombie films like the remake of Dawn of the Dead and 28 Days Later, which was kind of part of this zombie renaissance, which sort of, led to The Walking Dead and a lot of other zombie films. So there was that. And also, when they were promoting the film in America, they got quotes from lots of other filmmakers or genre notables
Mhm.
like Stephen King, Peter Jackson, George A. Romero, Quentin Tarantino, and so on and so forth. And Eli Roth helped them promote the movie in the States. This is Hostel director
Mhm.
Eli Roth. And in fact, and as did Greg Nicotero, who's this legendary special makeup effects artist who's also an executive producer on The Walking Dead. And so actually when they screened the film at the ArcLight in Hollywood as a sort of a premiere on the West Coast, Greg Nicotero made up a lot of the crowd that were there, including Eli Roth, with zombie makeups. So
Oh my
you've got
gosh.
this like absolutely legendary makeup artist whose career stretches all the way back to Evil Dead 2, sort of, doing zombie makeups on cinema goers at the ArcLight watching Shaun of the Dead. And so I incorporated all this into the book, but also I was aware that like all of these people had interesting stories as well. Eli Roth had an interesting story. Quentin Tarrant, Edgar Wright would later make one of the fake trailers for the film Grindhouse, as
Mhm.
did Rob Zombie, as did Eli Roth. And Grindhouse was directed by Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez. And they had all worked with different people, and I just sort of saw um, all these other avenues of research and writing that I had to kind of stop myself from pursuing because the book is about Shaun of the Dead. It's not
Mhm.
about death. It's not about Grindhouse or Hostel or Cabin Fever or Evil Dead 2. But with my second book, I sort of thought, well, let's pull back on the horror genre and tell this story of how it really did come back from the dead in 1996 with Scream,
Mhm.
and then from that point has been a seemingly endless triumphant march of success leading to the present day where as we sit here, Weapons is enjoying its second week at number one in the US box office. Already this year, we've had, Sinners, which was a surprisingly massive and deservedly massive hit. Uh, Final Destination Bloodlines, 28 years later, and on and on.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, there has been a lot of incredible horror lately. If you had to pick one from 2025 so far, that is your favorite. Some of the ones you just listed 28 years later, you mentioned Sinners. What is your favorite horror film of the year up to this point?
Well, I have to say, in terms of the most fun I had at the movies was Final Destination Bloodlines.
Oh, so
And
good.
I should say that, I mean, I've always been something of a fan of the Final Destination movies, but I never really thought of them as necessarily one of my franchises. I mean, I think of the Alien franchise as one of my
Mhm.
franchises, but I mean, I've seen all the Final Destination movies. Some are better than others, but I've generally enjoyed them all. But I had the pleasure of going to see the film at a press screening, but it was like a big cinema, and they give away a couple of beers before it started? Yes, they did. But I don't think that particularly affected my judgment. But the whole audience was just into it. And you could say it's the sixth film in a franchise. How good is it going to be? But it's been a long time since the fifth Final Destination movie, and they had clearly taken their time, making sure this was exactly, this was a great movie that people wanted, and I had a fun time with that. The other choice, I mean, it's hard to, not mention Sinners, and I had a great time at Weapons the other day,
Oh,
just
yeah.
because I mean, I don't think they really let much information out before it premiered, but I deliberately stayed away.
Me
And certainly
too.
the first, I enjoyed it all, but I think the first half, when you have no idea what's going on, is was absolutely thrilling. But the most, in a strange way, the most interesting experience I've had was with uh, 28 years later, which was a film I was so looking forward to. And 28 days later, just amazing piece of work. I was so excited to see what they're going to do, and I really enjoyed the first half. And then the second half, I just thought, this isn't sort of what I want. This isn't what I
Mm,
want from the film. It makes, I'm not going to spoil
yeah.
anything, but it takes the first half is a really fantastic zombie film. The second half sort of veers off in a different direction and then has this uh very peculiar kind of final scene. And sort of I came out a bit harumphing, but then, and this sometimes happens, I thought about it for 48 hours and sort of read about it a little bit as well, but I mostly just thought about it, and then I realized that the problem was with me and not the film, and then I sort of, without seeing it again, although I planned to, I totally came around to it, and I think
Okay.
that's it's sometimes it's Final Destination Bloodlines. I had a great time, but I'm not going to think too much about that film, and
Mm.
I don't think it's designed for you to think about it. I think that's an insult. But 28 years later, I already sort of sat with that for a couple of days, and and then came around to it. And I'm very excited for the next one.
Oh, yeah. And then we're already more than halfway through the year, which blows my mind. But looking ahead, there's a lot of great horror coming out. We have Five Nights at Freddy's 2, we have The Black Phone 2, The Conjuring Last Rites, we have the next chapter in The Strangers retelling. What are you looking forward to the most in theaters the rest of this year?
Well, I think I'm going to cheat a little bit and go into the first month of next year and say that the new Scream movie.
Oh my gosh.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty excited about because uh, it's had quite a journey to the screen
Mhm.
Christ, not to the scream to the screen. It had I mean, people can Google what happened, but the people that were announced to be making this film are not making this film, but instead, uh, Kevin Williamson is directing the film, and Kevin Williamson uh, wrote the first Scream, which came out, way back in 1996. It starts my book, and that's 30 years ago. And since then, I mean, he's written a lot of great screenplays. He's directed some stuff, but the idea of him sort of coming back to reclaim kind of his mantle is very exciting to me. And I'm interested in what they're going to do.
Mhm.
I don't think
No,
he'd
I
be
am too.
doing it unless he had some good ideas up his sleeve.
Every time a new member of the cast is announced, I am so curious how they're going to bring the character back, how they're going to fit this into the story. I have no idea what the plan is, but yeah, I think out of all the upcoming horror films, that's the one I'm most curious about because I can't figure out what they're going to do.
The One of my favorite stories in the book is I spoke with Matthew Lillard, who obviously was in the first Scream, but is also in the first Five Nights at Freddy's, which was this. I mean, I think people knew it was going to do well, but actually did incredibly well. It was this
Mhm.
huge hit. I'm not going to spoil his role, but he's a big part of the movie in many ways, the most memorable part of the movie. And the film came out during the writers and actors strike, so there was no premiere or anything.
Right.
And he told me, and this was after the end of the strike, so he could do interviews again. But he told me that he went to see it uh, at his local cinema on a Sunday afternoon or whatever with his family. And I mean, I love Matthew Lillard, but as he I think would admit, it's been a while since he's been, a major role in a huge hit movie like that.
Mhm.
And he said he's sort of forgotten why people don't go and see their own films. Like an opening weekend, it was a big success. And, because he said he walked in there with his family and everybody just turned and looked at him. And he sat down and he wasn't, he was saying it was a very nice reception. And then when he appeared on screen, people went, bananas in the audience. And he said he had a great time and his family was incredibly embarrassed. And what more could you ask? What more could you ask for from a film screening?
Oh my
But
gosh.
I've spoken, I mean, I've interviewed Matthew a couple of times and he is a treasure and a delight, I have to say.
Oh, that is great. Well, your book does include a lot of exclusive anecdotes from horror icons from Eli Roth, which you mentioned earlier, Nev Campbell, Jamie Lee Curtis. What was some of the research that went into writing this book?
It was a lot of calling people up and being, I mean, I mean,
Mhm.
it's a lot of calling people up and saying, could you spare an hour talking to me? What's always fun, I find, is when you get um, someone to tell a story you haven't heard before involving somebody else, and then you get the other person on the phone, and either their version of events differs wildly, or nicely dovetails with the first person. And my favorite example of this in the book is that in 2004, Lionsgate releases Saw, the first Saw. It is an enormous hit, and Lionsgate immediately say, "Okay, we're going to do a sequel, but we want it to come out in a year's time." And they haven't got a script or anything. And James Wan, who directed the first film, had signed a deal to do a different movie and didn't want to do a sequel to Saw, so they couldn't get him to do it. So now they're desperate. They need a script, they need a director, and they come across. They've already the production company has this script called The Desperate, which was written by a guy who hadn't directed anything up to that point called Darren Bousman. And he'd written the script called The Desperate, and so they said, "Hey, let's turn this into Saw 2, and we'll get another director to do it." And Darren said, "Well, he spoke. I guess he spoke to his lawyer about this, and his lawyer said, well, they should know if you look at this certain clause that they have to give you the first right of refusal to direct the film because no one thought The Desperate was going to be like a big movie, so they were like, fine, you can direct it. But once they decide it's going to be Saw 2,
Uh-huh.
then suddenly they're like, well, we don't know if we want this guy who's never directed anything making the movie, even though actually James Wan had also not really directed much. So anyway, the production company agrees that Darren can do it, but now Darren's going to go and sell himself to Lionsgate. He's going to sell himself to a bunch of executives. And he sits down at this meeting and they're like, why should we let you direct this film? And he's like, oh, I've directed lots of award-winning horror shorts and they've won awards at film festivals and so on and so forth. Now, he had not directed any horror shorts, which had not won any awards at film festivals because they did not exist. And
Mhm.
so Darren's telling me this story and he goes, so he's saying, yeah, no, I directed all the shows. And then he says, well, and then Peter Block, who's an executive at Lionsgate, says, well, that's great. Uh, come by on Monday and show us one of the shorts that
Mhm.
you've directed. And then Darren has to spend the entire weekend filming one of the shorts that he said that, he already has in his pocket. And Darren told me this story, and then I spoke with Peter Block, the executive, and Peter was like, "Oh yeah, that's exactly what happened." He's like, "What you got to remember in Hollywood is that you just got to assume that everybody's lying." So we've got this kid here talking about like his award-winning shorts, and he was like one of my fellow executives, a lot more trusting than me, is like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm sure Darren's." We don't need to see them or whatever. I'm sure Darren's got them. And I was like, no, we need to see these things. I want to see these things before we hand this guy like $10 million or whatever. And so that's always fun. And in fact, it's like, the story of Saw in itself is incredibly, um, entertaining, frankly, from a perspective of 20 years. But sometimes the really fun thing is when, as in this case, they've got a hit on, a company's got a hit on their hands and they want to do it again, but the people aren't there to do it
Mhm.
again. So now it's like, and it's very difficult making movies if you take 5 years doing it. If you take basically, if you have to do it in 6 months, which is basically what they're asking him to do, then things get pretty saucy.
Yeah. Oof. Well, that is a great story. I loved hearing that. Other than that story, was there another favorite part for you of writing this book, whether it was something you learned or someone that you got to speak with? What was like your favorite memory from writing this?
It's always fun talking to effects people,
Hmm.
because they just don't care. Sorry, there's sort of much. I think partly because they don't get interviewed much.
Mm,
They're much more. They're much freer. I think they haven't really got anything to lose. They're not being judged on. They don't really have to be the face of the movie. They're the guys, in the trenches making these things. And I spoke to the special effects guy on James Gunn's directorial debut, Slither,
ooh,
and
nice.
he was saying, which is a really gooey movie. It's a very, I mean, there are some digital effects, but it's a lot of practical effects, really. And there was a point when the special effects guy was sort of arranging some effect that looked like a vagina, basically. And James Gunn, he said, James Gunn, shouted across the set, like, how come everything that you make always looks like genitalia, And the special effects guy was like, it's in the script you wrote, James. It's in the script you wrote, and started pointing to, so and so approaches a vagina like, a hole in a monster or whatever. So that's fun. Special effects guys are always fun to talk to.
Yeah, and they always, yeah, have such interesting stories and they know about, the making of and what goes into the prosthetics and the makeup. And I feel like, yeah, interviewing prosthetics people, makeup people, you learn so much that you wouldn't have known just watching the final product on screen.
Also, I should just say the special effects guy in question in that story is Todd Masters,
Oh, nice.
um, who's worked on a whole load of stuff. It's just there's like a million names in this book, and so sometimes they do slip my mind. But Todd was very generous with his time and is an incredibly good artist.
Oh, that is awesome. When you do these interviews, do you do them like this, like over Zoom and it's video? Is it audio over the phone or is it through email? How do you uh, prefer to do interviews? And then also, what is like the most typical way you do interviews?
I would say it's mostly Zoom.
Zoom.
Sometimes people will just ask for it to be just audio Zoom,
Mhm.
presumably. I don't know why necessarily, because they don't want to. Because they're like haven't had a shower or whatever.
Mhm.
But no, it's mostly Zoom. I have found traditionally that if you send email questions, most of the time you get back very short and unrevealing
Yes.
answers. There are exceptions. This isn't connected to the book, but when I worked at Entertainment Weekly, I covered the HBO show Vinyl, which was about the record industry during the 70s, and the pilot was directed by Martin Scorsese, and uh, I wanted to interview Martin Scorsese, and his people said, well, he won't get on the phone, but if you send some email questions, he'll answer them. And I was
Mhm.
like, ugh, it just never works out. But I sent the questions over. And in this case, what they must have done was sit Mr. Scorsese down and asked him the questions and then recorded his answers. Because then I got emailed 10 pages or whatever of Scorsese's answers, which as you read it, you just knew that he wasn't typing this; he was talking this because it sounds. Anyone who's ever seen Martin Scorsese talk knows that in the best possible way, he's a fast talking motor mouth.
Mhm.
And so that was the one time that worked out. But it's always better to try to get uh, people on the phone or face to face, and you can ask follow up questions and
Yeah.
hopefully get some sort of rapport and yeah, I find that's always better.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I've done phone interviews, which are very hard for me because sometimes the connection isn't very good. And then also, if you're not recording it, you just have to write as fast as humanly possible. I've done the same thing, interviews over email, and then gotten, like 1 or 2 word answers. So this is my preferred way because
Yeah.
if I can't do it face to face, like go to coffee and sit down and talk, this is the best because then you have the audio, you have the video, and you can rewind it, write down stuff, double check that what you heard the first time was correct. So I think Zoom has helped a lot with journalism.
Yeah. I mean, it's good and bad, I guess. But
Mhm.
yeah. On the whole, it's great.
So there are so many things to love about the horror genre, and so many different entry points for people, whether it's, something like a horror comedy, or there's stuff like The Addams Family or Casper, where it's not, straight up horror, but it's like a good entryway. What is your favorite thing about the horror genre?
What's interesting about the horror genre, I think, is it's very open to new things, but also loves old things. So, to me personally, I mean, there are people that like watching essentially the same movie over and over again. That will watch all of the Friday the 13th movies in the course of a couple of days, and when. Which are, I know there's differences, but it's essentially the same movie over and over again. I think they like the comfort of the familiarity.
Mhm.
And when Friday the 13th rolls around in real life, they'll list all the films in order, and that's great, and that's fine, and great. But what I love is the surprise.
Mhm.
What I love about the horror genre is you never know. Theoretically, you can do anything. And what I find disappointing is that usually the people do the same thing again.
Mhm.
Either through sequels or I mean sequels are the lifeblood of the genre, the financial lifeblood of the genre. So I'm not complaining about that too much. But I'm always disappointed if I'm watching something which I feel I've seen before. Whereas what I love is watching something where I have no idea where it's going. And that's why, I mean, as I said, I went to Weapons, watched it at a big screen. I'd been careful not to learn anything about the movie beforehand. And certainly for the first hour, and again, I enjoyed it all, but for the first hour, I was just like, what is going on? I have no idea what this could turn into absolutely anything at all.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's what I personally really love in a movie.
Yeah. I
You just
100%
like
agree.
when what I love is when the person in charge knows what they're doing,
Mhm.
but you've no idea what they're doing or what they're going to do. And I find that an incredibly I mean the best one of the best examples of that, I guess, is From Dusk Till Dawn, where
Mm.
halfway through it turns into a completely different movie, and I'm not sure anyone's. I mean, I'm pretty sure I knew the twist before going in, but I think in a sense everybody wants to see that film, not knowing what's going to happen, halfway through. But it's just, I think it becomes increasingly difficult these days to I guess to pull off that kind of trick. I mean, I remember it's not, I guess it is a horror film, but I remember going to see the M. Night Shyamalan film Split,
Oh, right.
uh, and which is, I mean, I enjoyed that film a lot, but then in the last 10 seconds, you discover that it is, in fact, a sequel to a previous M. Night Shyamalan, that it is a sequel to a previous film.
Uh-huh.
And I just remember like screaming, like, you gotta be kidding me. And in the cinema when this sort of fantastic magic trick. I'm always looking for the magic trick, I think, in movies, whether they're horror movies or not. And I don't know, that's always fun. That's always what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and to me, two directors that are doing it perfectly right now are Zach Crager with Barbarian and Weapons, and then you have Osgood Perkins. The Monkey is another movie where it's like I had no idea what was going on, what was going to happen next. It's uh,
I
so
should have
good.
said I because that was quite early in the year, so I'd forgotten about that. But yeah, I saw that at the cinema, and that is a lot of fun. I have to say that's an awful lot of fun.
Well, Clark, I could sit here and talk with you about horror films all day, but I know you have a very busy schedule, so I want to say thank you very much for taking time to join me. If people want to follow you and keep up with all your other upcoming projects, where would be a good place for people to come and follow you?
I'm at Clark Collis pretty much everywhere. I guess I'm probably on Instagram. More than anywhere. So if you want to see me repost other people's photographs of my book, then please do. It's funny whenever I meet like a friend or a family member I haven't seen in a while, they're always like, "Wow, your books are doing really well." I'm like, "That's because you follow me on Instagram and you think
Oh my
but
gosh.
that it's just that all that's happening in the world is the cover of my book." Yeah, Blue Sky, I'm on a little bit, and you can Facebook, you can find me anywhere.
And Clark, if people want to pre-order their very own copy of the book, where would be the best place for them to go?
Well, the usual giant conglomerates will sell it to you. It's out on September 2nd in the States and September 4th in the UK. You can also order it directly from 1984 Publishing,
And get
which
this
I advise.
gorgeous cover with the black trim. Everything about this book is incredible, and I can't wait to continue reading it. But Clark, thank you again so much for taking time out of your day to join me, and congratulations on the release of your book.
Well, Taylor, thank you so much for having me on, and I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Okay.
Bye.